When it comes to product growth, the hardest, but for me, most rewarding part of the job is driving towards ambitious goals. What makes it even harder is when those goals are completely uncertain, such as working in a startup that doesn't know if or how it's going to achieve product market fit. Hi, everyone. I'm Simon Jackson. I'm the founder of Hypergrowth Data, and I am super excited today to get what I think might be a masterclass in managing this exact situation. Because joining me today is Tim House. Tim recently finished up as head of product at 1B Stories, which provided AI video generation tools for solopreneurs, small businesses, and brand marketers. And before that, he was a director of product at Canva, being instrumental in shaping content products that hundreds of millions of people know and love today. He was a senior product manager at travel giant Booking.com and even a former data scientist way back, which sounds worthy of a whole separate discussion. So welcome, Tim. Thank you for joining.
Well, thanks very much, Simon. It's great to be talking to you today.
I love it. So we actually caught up recently, and you were telling me a bit about your story at 1B, and I was just like blown away, like how you've taken all those years of experience across lots of different companies and even these bigger companies like Booking and Canva, brought it into a startup environment and just like totally changed your growth trajectory. So I'd love you to tell us a bit about the story, set the context for us. What's the big thing you were trying to achieve and how'd you get there?
Sure. So I just came out of Canva, and I joined Canva when it was at a small, now 40 million odd monthly active users. Left, I think, more around 160, 180 million monthly active users. So enormous growth through my years at Canva. Had a great amount of fun there, worked with some incredible people. But after years working at big tech companies, I was looking for a break. So my plan was to leave Canva, spend a couple of months with my family, just relaxing a little bit, and then find some new opportunities. And I was thinking startups is probably where I would go next. So I left Canva, and within a month, a recruiter from Singapore had contacted me and said, hey, looking at your background, we've got a startup that really needs a head of product, and you look like you're a perfect fit. Do you want to meet the CEO? And I was sort of brushing them a bit like, no, look, I'm taking a break. They're like, no, meet the CEO. So I met the CEO, Anu, and they were incredible. They were great. They're everything a product manager is looking for in a CEO. And they were telling me about the problems they were engaging in their product, Videofy, and the customers. I thought, oh, wow, this is really, really great. So I agreed to come on board as head of product, even though I didn't quite take the break. And it was an amazing experience. I was only there for a short amount of time. I only ended up being there for 4 months before a exit via acquisition. But it was an amazing 4 months. And in that time, the team and I were able to achieve a lot and had some really great experiences there.
Fantastic. And maybe it's too early to speak to it, so we can jump into it later. But I'm super excited to hear when you joined, what was the expectation on you? What was the goal? What were you helping the company to achieve?
Yeah, so one of the things I loved about the company was they had a really clear goal of achieving 1 million ARR to demonstrate product market fit. At the time, they were very open that time they were not on a path to be achieving that goal. But they believed they could. And I love scary big goals. The right goal is one that when you first hear it, you go, ooh, that's a little bit frightening. And if you're going to succeed as a startup, that really is the type of goal you need to be setting. And so I was so inspired to hear about this company that had these really big goals and also had really credible conversations about how they were going to go about and achieve it.
That's exactly what you want from your head of product, right? I love it.
That's it.
And I mean, that is a very scary, ambitious goal, especially if they're open with you that they're not on track to achieve that. What sort of gave you the motivation to take on that challenge?
The product was good.
Yeah.
That was number one thing. So the product was called Videofy, and it was a way to come in very easily. You could upload a document, like a Word document. You could connect to a YouTube video and get a summary. You could just put in a topic. You could put in a website, and it would automatically generate out short videos that were perfect to put up on social media. And it was a really fun product to use. And they had a strong customer base. They were growing perfectly healthily. There was nothing wrong with the growth. It just wasn't yet on the track to the incredibly ambitious goals that they had. And it really felt like a product that could grow, that had an opportunity to grow, that was in an exciting area. I'd had experience from AI video generation from Canva, and I thought, wow, this is a new environment to test this out. Also, I met the three founders, I met the investors, and they were all great. And it felt like a team that I could get results with.
Fantastic. So you saw the potential given your experience. You liked the product. You liked the founders and the team you'd be working with. It sounds like
That's it.
wonderful. So, all right, you starting off. You've got this crazy goal, ambitious goal. Take us a little on the journey. What happened when you started? You know, what did your product brain immediately think? Yes, this is going well, or here's something that needs to change.
The first thing that really jumped out at me was just how much work was being pushed out the door. So the company was running on sprints, so standard 2-week sprints using a Jira backlog. I saw the Jira backlog and I thought, oh, I must be confused because there's 50 tickets in this current sprint. Just an epic amount of work, more individual tickets than I've ever seen in a sprint before. And I'm looking and going, oh, I must be confused. They must be not planning the sprints very well. No, that was how much work they were pushing out in each sprint. It was, wow. I think, about 10 to 12 engineers, but they were just shipping a huge amount of work and really quite extraordinary. The engineering frameworks had been set up really well, so there was very few friction points for the engineers to put work out there into the world. I thought, wow, this is amazing. This group's doing incredible. But as you do, I started talking to the engineers. I started talking to the other team members. And what I got overwhelmingly from them was this feeling of frustration that they weren't having an impact. And this was quite confusing. Like they're just shipping an incredible amount of work. This is an incredible team. They're doing great stuff. Why are you feeling like you're not having the impact? And what everyone said was, we don't have focus. We are working on projects here, projects there, project for this customer, project that company, this user feedback, that user feedback. And we're not moving towards something, which was quite a gap because talking to the CEO and company leadership, there was a really clear goal. And that was really confusing. And I thought, oh, maybe I've got something wrong with the personalities here. So I talked to the CEO, talked to the founders. And I said, hey, look, I'm worried about focus. And they said, oh, yeah, we are too. Yeah, we're really worried about focus. We just everyone's working really hard. Everyone's pushing, but it just wasn't coming together in the company in the way that everyone in the company wanted to, not because of fault of anyone, not because of someone who wanted to be a feature factory, not because someone was acting like a hippo. It just wasn't coming together, which is, well, it's frustrating for everyone. It's like, great, this is a great opportunity to pull things together and get this team focused in the right direction.
So, I mean, that's really amazing. They have this clear goal, but from top to bottom, bottom to top, everyone's feeling this lack of focus.
That's
maybe
right.
Apart from hiring you, were you able to put your finger on maybe where that breakdown was happening?
So, and this was quite a difficult day, I think, for a few people. I had some meetings with the team members and I said to them, hey, can you tell me what the company goal is? And they said, oh, no. Another team member, hey, can you tell me what the company goal is? Oh, I remember something about revenue. And what I spoke to, I remember I spoke to 8 people and only 2 of them knew what the company goal was off the top of their head. And so then I went to the company leadership and I said, hey, I've got something quite challenging to tell you, that while we and you and me and this leadership team is talking about this company goal a lot, it is not filtering down to the team. And the reasons for that are, as I think every product manager knows, the really important things, you have to say them over and over and over again until people laugh when you say them. That's the time you know you've said them enough. And that wasn't happening. The company goal had been presented at events, but then wasn't said every single day in every single meeting, which is what it needs to be. Also, when tasks were coming in, there wasn't the work done to say, hey, this task helps us achieve the company goal by this. And so the teams were feeling like, yeah, we've got a company goal, but then today we're talking about this set of tasks for this set of customers without making the connections to the company goal. That was a difficult conversation, and the company leadership just really took it on board. And it was like a moment of, okay, that's hard to hear. What are we going to do about it? Which was actually just incredible that there was such a willingness to say, okay, we want to get this result. We're committed to this result. kind of switching it around to me. Great, you've told us a problem. Now, how do you fix it?
That's amazing. I think a rare quality in leaders often. And I think we'll get to it in a second on how things change. But at the time, if you've got a lot of the engineering team presumably wanting to drive a lot of impact, maybe not clear on what that impact should be, were they trying to measure or observe the impact of their work in any way when you first joined?
Yes. So, kind of, let me put it. One of the anti patterns, and it's one of those anti patterns that happen through the best of intentions. There was a product manager in the company who was doing some really amazing work. And one of the things they were doing really well is that they were taking ownership of data. They were using Mixpanel, and they had been working with the engineers to define events, which were going to Mixpanel, and then they were building dashboards. And they, as good product managers should, were taking full ownership of that area. In this particular case, that full ownership, though, kind of siloed it. So while they were doing the right work to get the data out to the company, engineers and other team members weren't being challenged to use the data themselves to make decisions. Instead, the product manager was doing quite the admirable thing to say, no, it's my job to get this answer for you, which is great. In this particular case, though, what would have been more effective? Say the engineers, hey, you're building this. I want you to decide what metric you think this is likely going to hit, track what it is. If we need new events, let's build those and define those. So there was data being used. There was on every Friday afternoon, there was a great company like end of week meeting where everyone presented what they shipped. And we would then go through the company metrics and how they would be changed that week. So there was an awareness of data, but it wasn't as integrated into the engineering and build operations as it could have been.
Yeah, makes sense. So if that's how things were, how and when did things start to change? What was it that you think set the company on a different path?
So, yes, I'll get into some of the details because it was fascinating about how everyone wanted focus, but everyone agreed there wasn't focus. How that had got to, how a group of really committed, effective professionals got to that point. So, what was happening was that the company knew they needed user feedback and they needed data and they needed to be acting on those things. Great. So they had built, like I said, data tracking, the events and the dashboards. They'd also built feedback flows into the product. They had points where they say, hey, email us with feedback. And they were getting a lot of feedback in and they were getting a lot of data in, which is great. It's amazing. They're communicating with users exactly what you should be doing. What was happening, though, would be that, for instance, a user writes in, oh, I couldn't find this button. It was really confusing. Great. That becomes a Jira task. Change the button to make it easier. Or they see that one of the data on how long it takes to generate a video was slowing down randomly. Great, fix those slowdowns. And each of these pieces of feedback was coming in and becoming a task to fix. And the team were pushing out these fixes incredibly fast. It was really quite extraordinary. What wasn't happening was no one was stepping back and going, what is the job these users are trying to do? What is the goal they're trying to achieve? What are all of the steps on the goal? And what does the user feedback mean about building hypothesis about how the users are going about achieving their jobs to be done? It was, this part's confusing, let's fix it. This part I can't understand it, let's fix it. I want this feature, let's build it. And that is how that focus was being lost. So what I did immediately was say, hey, look, let's dial down the reacting to each one, which is going to be a bit scary because users are telling you they want things and we're going to say we're not going to action it immediately. Let's really understand. So me and one of the other team members, we spent time going through all of these tickets because we're getting a lot and theming them. All right, this is about video generation ease. This is about video generation quality. This is about sharing. This is about platforms. And we start to think and say, hey, actually, there are just 4 or 5 big themes going on. With that product thinking, then, very quickly, opportunities came up to make changes. I'll give you an example. So our goal was to get more revenue, which means users have to be able to sign up to a subscription. Very straightforward.
Mhm.
There had not really been any feedback about the signing up to the subscription process, so we assumed the assumption was everything was fine. But since that was so key, we're like, okay, well, let's do some friends and family testing. Let's do some dog fooding here. What is the flow to sign up to users? And what we discovered was that if you went to the subscription landing page and clicked on the subscription you want, you then had to sign in. But the copy on the sign in page at that point was all about creating an account. So if you already had an account that you were using for free and now you wanted to pay for it, and you get to a page that says create an account, that was a barrier. And that was an incredibly easy fix. Once we fixed that, we started to see more users paying and signing up for subscriptions through that flow. So there were a few cases like that, which were like immediate. Oh, if we think about it from the customer's point of view, not what they're asking for, but what they're trying to achieve, then you can immediately find these pain points and we're able to fix those. And that actually gave us an immediate bump in growth very quickly in 2 to 3 weeks, which was very encouraging.
That's amazing. It begs the question, I think. So you've given examples of taking user feedback and creating themes out of that to create focus on what to work on, but also that sign up example of, well, there's something that's critical to the business and to achieve our goals, and it's not what our users are telling us, but it's something that we need to make a change to. Um, did you have, when you work in a situation like this, do you bring a mental framework on how you break down those possible avenues or directions for the team to focus on?
So that's exactly what was it. So while there were these, quick wins that could be gone just by thinking about it from a user's perspective, those were good, but they didn't bend the curve up enough to get us towards this really ambitious goal. What we recognized was that we needed to do a big shift in how everyone was working, how goals were being set, how priorities were being ordered. The approach, and actually I'll give you some background on this, which is an interesting learning from it. Coming from larger companies, change is hard, changing is difficult. You have to work people through it. You have to propose, discuss, get feedback, update, and work through. I was assuming the same here. And I remember I went to the CEO with this framework I'll go through. And I said, hey, look, I think we need to shift to this. I'm thinking sort of 3 weeks to propose it, to get feedback and talk about it. And the CEO said, oh, look, I think this framework's great. I think this is exactly what we need to do. I love every part of it, but do it in 3 days. Which is really, it was a stark shift between coming from a really large organization like Canva to a startup, when basically just replace the word weeks with days. And that's when you get the sense of the timing differences of what happens. So yeah, we recognize we need to change the whole organization towards these goals. So looking around at product frameworks, we picked opportunity solution trees from Teresa Torres. And what I liked about opportunity solution trees was that that focus was such a big part of it, that at the top you have the outcome that you're looking to achieve, and then all of the opportunities and solutions add up into a tree towards that outcome. And so we selected that and very quickly did some brainstorming. And what came out of that was actually really useful, was to say, well, we've got this goal, 1 million ARR. What has to be true for us to achieve that? And everyone in the company was involved in this, not just product and engineering. There was marketing and operations and sales as well. And we had really good conversations like, well, what is our best estimates about what marketing can bring into, or what product-led growth can bring to the front page? Okay, we think it's this number. Well, our current ratio of free to paid is this. So if we're going to get this number in the door, we need this many to actually start becoming free users. And then that free to pro ratio, we probably need that to increase. And so we're playing with these outcomes that we needed, and to say, all right, we need these things to be true. We need to get this many people to the door. We need to convert this many of them to actually using the product for the freemium version. And we need to convert this many to paid. And that wasn't an estimate of what we thought we could do. That was, if we're going to achieve this big, scary goal, this is what has to be true. And that was then very useful, because then we started looking at the opportunities. And the first thing we looked at opportunities was segmenting user groups. So looking at different types of users that might be able to bring us business. The focus at the time had been on brand marketing, but it was looking increasingly like that wasn't going to get to the goal. Another user group we looked at was bloggers. So you can upload a blog post to Videofy and it create a short marketing video that could then be put on social media. But when we looked into it, there just weren't enough bloggers in the world. We would have to be converting something like some really unfeasible percentages of bloggers to have that work. It's like, okay, well, let's leave those opportunity, but that's not going to get us there. And what we really ended up with was that it was going to be small businesses that did their own marketing. That was going to be the only opportunity to get us to where we needed to go. All right, great. So it has to be true that we're going to have to get this small business user group. And then that on a tree, and we actually had a great big whiteboard. We're doing remote sessions, but we're using whiteboarding software, a great big whiteboard going through opportunities. And we started out with, I think more than 20 possible user groups. And then we're just putting lines through them, not big enough, too much work, not big enough, not big enough, too much work. And we just ended up with 2 or 3, which was an amazing, exactly the focus that we wanted. Then, okay, great. We've got our opportunities that we're going to focus on. We went back to the whole rest of the company and said, hey, now let's get solutions. This is our goal. The outcome we're going for is million ARR. To achieve that, we have to have these conversion rates. We have to have these user rates. And here is the opportunities we're going to focus on. We're going to focus on these user groups. Now, everyone, let's talk about solutions. What are the solutions that we can do? And it just like it took a lid off of creativity. Like it just came out. Ideas, we can do that. We can fix this. We can do that. We can fix this. I ran 3 amazing brainstorming sessions with different team members, just with this massive list of possible solutions, which is exactly what you want, because then it's this great list of things that can be prioritized against. And what we did out of that was we took the outcomes and made them into goals and assigned each team of the company goals. It's like, okay, great. You are responsible for bringing this many people to the front page. You are responsible for converting this many people. You are responsible for getting the rating of video quality from this number to that number. Great. Here are the solutions. Here's our priority. Like, here's my prioritization as a product manager. Tell me if you disagree. And what was really useful in that was that it allowed most of the conversation with the teams to be about the solutions, about like the nitty gritty, getting your hands dirty work. How are we going to fix this? And they also felt confident that they could have an idea for a solution, then decide it wasn't the best one. Let's do something else, because the opportunities were fixed, the goals were fixed, the outcomes were fixed. The solutions, they can be changing. Let's ship them fast. Does it work? Does it not work? We can change that. But what isn't changing is our top goal, that we want to get to 1 million ARR.
This is just a wonderful story of how to take this chaotic, ambitious goal and break it down into focus for a team. And I think it might be useful for a lot of people to reflect on one part, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Tim, but it sounds like you started with the goal, broke that down into these are the objectives or more narrow outcomes that we need to be true to achieve that higher order thing. Based on that, you used some external data and your knowledge of the world to, it almost sounds like, form a strategy, like define the customer segments that you were targeting and how you wanted to play in the space. Then those individual objectives became delegated to specific teams. But I imagine that the strategy, like the customer segments that you were targeting in the field you wanted to play on, remained fixed for all teams. Is that right?
That's correct. Yes, that's right. And we used user personas very purposefully there. So we were using Notion within the company, and before we went to the company with the users, we had all the user personas created. So with a name, who they are, a picture that we'd got from stock media, what are their pushes, what are their pulls, what are their habits, what are their anxieties, to really give that depth. And also what was actually really useful in the user persona process was that I think I made 10 user personas in the end. And all of those kind of related to the work that had been happening in the company. And I went to the team and said, okay, here is our focus user personas. Here's our 2 or 3 focus user personas. Here are the others, and they are not prioritized. Here they are. You can read about them. We're not working towards those. One day we will. Maybe next year, maybe the year after that. For instance, I think the holy grail for a lot of companies is large enterprises who you can make really significant returns from a single contract. They're very difficult to get into, though. That was the user persona. that was a one day. When we are not focusing on that now, and it actually really helped the team to say, here is what we are focusing on now, and here is what we are not focusing on now. Not saying we're never going to focus on them, but we are not focusing on them now. So let's have everyone have our focus on the areas we are focusing on.
It's beautiful. And so you've created this, helped the team create this structure, this focus, this accountability to specific objectives. So teams are now ideating, churning through solutions. Um, how are they, keeping on track, knowing which direction to go, knowing where to invest their time, and which solutions were working and which weren't?
Sorry, you just broke up there for a second.
Oh yeah, audio track recording's gone a bit funny. Are you back?
Yeah, I'm back.
Cool. I'll repeat the question. So, just give me a second. Oh yeah. So you've worked with the team, helped them create this amazing focus, created specific objectives that each team is now accountable to achieving, and teams are coming up with lots of creative solutions and trying things out. How was it that once they had this focus and clarity on their objective, that the things they were building were helping to drive those things and knowing where to spend their energy?
Yeah, really, really good question. So one of the practices which actually the CEO introduced this, I'd like to take credit for this, but I didn't. The CEO introduced this was that as well as while all this was happening, we really spooled up the user research efforts. So we were talking to multiple users per week in interviews, and we were using, the CEO had set up transcription software. And so immediately after the interviews, transcripts were available, and he was sharing those transcripts with the entire company. So every time there was an interview, everyone in the company immediately had access to it, which was amazing. So the data was in dashboards the entire company, all of this user research is coming in, and the user research was then very focused towards the outcomes that we were aiming towards. So the teams, even though the engineers, for instance, weren't being involved in the research, they had it all accessible to them. They could quickly read it. What we also did was with each team is we set up dashboards for each of the outcomes we were looking for. So everyone could see what they were at every point, and we had, here is the goal we're looking for, and here's the line, and we got to curve that line up towards that. So the teams pretty immediately took on a high level of ownership of that the actions that they were taking were moving towards the goals. And in this case, it really didn't need any pushing from me. The teams were immediately saying, this isn't going to get the job done. Let's do something else. Oh, we've released it, but I'm disappointed that this hasn't moved the needle enough on that goal. To be honest, it was more me saying, no, like not everything's going to be a winner. Let's keep on going. Let's not become discouraged. So that was how the teams were having the input of user research that they were reading, like, okay, no, here are the problems users are having. Let's focus on this, which I think helped everyone feel like, okay, this is credible that these solutions, and then they release, and then they were looking at the dashboards. The volumes we were working on were low enough, and the goal we were looking at was a large enough increase that we didn't need to use statistics or A/B tests. It was going to be obvious when a change had the shift that we wanted. And we did have a couple of changes that increased by some of the metrics by 50% or 100%, which were then immediately visible in the following days after launching.
That's really incredible. And as someone who's done a lot of A/B testing in big companies, it's I also agree. I mean, I think that's a wonderful approach when you're dealing with smaller numbers and you have to move really fast. And A/B testing has its time and place, but it's good for anyone out there who's maybe not done it so much. You don't have to feel bad if you're not getting into it straight away.
That's it.
Yeah, and I'm curious if was there ever a situation where maybe a team who was dealing with, say, like the acquisition or earlier part of the customer journey made an impact, and that flowed through the other metrics so that all the teams became aware?
Always.
Yeah.
Yes. This is one of the biggest challenges with metrics is the impact versus specificity. Because each team wants to say, oh, I want to show our impact and our impact alone, apart from anyone else working. I've got the approach I take to that is I use an analogy of sports teams. I think that can actually be a really useful analogy when working with products, because the goals that professional sports teams are actually very often the same as product, which is that you have these ambitious goals like winning the Formula One World Championship or winning the Premiership. that has to be in the end the goal you're after. But it also doesn't have to be, oh, we're all failures if we don't achieve it this year. No, it's an ambitious goal, and that's what it means to set ambitious goals. But using that framework, if your team succeeds and the other teams aren't, you are not succeeding. So where I challenge team members in that is that if somebody else does great work and your metric goes up, that is a win for everyone. Everyone can take that as a win. We'll celebrate people who did the work. That's not saying, oh, that's their win, not yours. It's saying, hey, they won today. Let's focus on getting tomorrow's win. And the team actually really took that attitude on really well. I think there was a lot of that already there. It was a very tight-knit team. So in this case, no, they were looking at those top-level metrics and really took ownership of, no, we're going to move these top-level metrics that are going to move the entire company towards its goal.
That's great. I think that's such a critical point to make. Is even if you're optimizing for maybe a lower level or a local metric, having that connection to high level and that accountability and shared responsibility across the company is really something you need. And I imagine it was very well. It sounds like in this case you were set up with a good team, but I imagine that's incredibly hard most of the time.
Yeah, it is. And I think it's something very common because, yes, there have been cases in other organizations where, yes, that top level metric is just maybe it's just too volatile. And the impact that your team has might not be able to be seen. So you do have to have a more specific metric that you believe correlates with the top level metric. However, I also, working with other product managers, make the argument that moving your specific metric without a movement in the company's goals is also like, yes, it's a win, but it's not a win you're going to go to your grandparents and say, hey, look, here's the big impact I had at work. In the end, like a sports team, it's about moving the entire team towards its goals. Yes, you want to do your best work, but you want to make sure that you're moving an entire team forward.
Great analogy. Um, so, if we move on a little, I mean, we've talked a lot about some of the wins and the positive changes that have happened. Uh, was there anything along the journey that backfired, that you took a learning from, or you had to pivot or adjust on?
Yeah, not anything that really backfired really badly. The biggest thing was the speed.
Hmm.
I was really quite. There were a few points when I came in. Oh yeah, no, let's take a few weeks to this. No days. Oh, this is going to take weeks to change. No, we need to change in days. And I remember that I had a conversation because I was managing a few of the team members who were all amazing, and I realized I was going to go to them. I need to go and say, hey, I'm going to change a lot of what you're doing day to day very, very fast. And we had this really positive meeting where I said, hey, look, I'm new. I'd only been at the company a few days at this point. And I said, look, I'm new. We haven't really got to know each other. I want to let you know that I'm going to be changing things very quickly. By the end of this week, I'm going to be making some changes, and the next week, I'm going to be making more changes. These changes will impact your schedule for the day, the type of work that you do. Change is hard. I know change is hard. I think everyone knows change is hard, and this is going to be hard for you all because change is hard. So I want to have some open communication here about how this change is going to be hard and what we can do about it. And then they were just like, yeah, no, let's do it. Let's do it faster. Because they had been feeling that frustration of like, we can have more impact. Let's have more impact. And the team was incredibly open to change, which was such a huge positive and a good thing for the company.
That's wonderful. Um, I'm curious, in your opinion, sometimes I see people who are quite resistant to the idea of being outcome driven and focusing themselves on measurable objectives. But it sounds like in this case, not only did that work really well, but you had a team who are hungry for it and motivated by getting there.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. And how objectives and scary big goals are talked about, for me, I've seen as the critical thing to that. So using the sports analogy again, a lot of the time when I've seen team members worried about being outcome measured is what they're worried about is that if you don't come first on the table, but you come second, you're all going to get yelled at and called failures. And that's then pretty reasonable to say, hey, we're using outcomes in some pretty toxic ways. That's not going to work. But if it is framed as we are striving to do something incredible, we are striving to do something new, we're going to push ourselves to do the best that we can, And even if we fall short, we're going to have a huge amount to build on and be proud of. But we're not going to make a safety net for ourselves. We're going to push ourselves to the most we can. Usually, team members are willing to come on board and know that they're going to be recognized for their efforts and for what they've done, even if the goal isn't hit in the way that it's wanted to be.
I mean, you framed it so beautifully. I think it speaks so well to it's not just about applying frameworks at work, right? It's not about having a metric or using OKRs or agile, whatever it is. It's how those things are implemented within the context of the culture that makes them work well for everyone.
Yeah, it's about, yeah, what does it mean for people's psychological safety to achieve innovative things or brand new things? And if it's, hey, you have to do something that no one else has ever done, and if you fail, it's horrible for everyone, and a puppy gets kicked and it's terrible, then no one's going to innovate. It has to be, okay, we're going to do this, and it might not work out, and that might not be good for us. Startups are volatile things, but fundamentally, things are going to be okay. Let's try and do something scary and new.
Brilliant. Okay, so you've introduced new ways of working, really created focus. Learned in this environment, you've had to move really fast. People seem to be responding very positively and well. Something we didn't cover actually before we get into the specifics of how execution worked is just jump ahead for us a little bit. Like, what are some of the outcomes that changed as a result of everything you were doing?
Revenue and users. So our revenue growth went from about 2% per week to 8% per week. And I think we peaked up at about 12% in 1 week. And that was really the big change, because that's what it was going to be. Being a startup, we were measuring changes as weekly metrics, not as monthly metrics, because monthly was just too slow. But also our signups increased by about the same proportion. They went from about 4.5% to 8% as well. And yeah, that's where, in the end, the rubber hit the road. That we were getting more users coming to the product, using the product for the first time in the free trial version, and then paying for the product. And our retention was extraordinary, actually. And this was, I'm not going to take any credit for this. Retention was strong before I joined up. It was the classic smile retention curve, where, yes, you had a drop off of retention in the first few weeks, but I think it was around week 6, the retention curve was going back up as users were coming back to the product. Which was such a strong foundation to build upon. But I want to be clear, that was not me. That was in place by the team before I joined the company.
Those are amazing results, and I think that's really what a lot of people should focus on. Is if you put these things in the right way, you bring that product thinking, that customer focus, combined with being responsible for driving value. Like, these are things you can achieve. These are real changes.
That's right.
So in terms of rubber hitting the road, I mean, can you walk us through a specific initiative and how delivery and impact actually looked once all these things had happened?
Sure. So one of the things that came out of user research incredibly clearly was pricing. Now, if anyone goes out there and looks at AI video generation today, you'll see it's actually kind of expensive. It works out to a couple of dollars per video. But as users are becoming more familiar with AI, OpenAI is doing amazing work, Google and Meta and Microsoft are out there doing incredible AI work. Users are really quickly getting this expectation about AI that it's actually a commodity feature, not a premium feature. And what I mean by that is not the thing that creates the absolute perfect outcome for them once or twice a week, once or twice a month. Is something they use instead. What it is something they use every day, over and over again. They get a pretty good outcome that they probably need to do some tweaking to. And the big difference in expectation between a commodity feature and a premium feature is price. So users were telling us they were expecting the price of this product to be much, much lower than it was. And then they wanted to use it over and over again. If they had one idea for a video, they wanted to create 5 and choose which one they liked the most. They didn't want to pay a lot for a single video that we were aiming to be the perfect video. So we got this feedback, and what we knew is we didn't just want to suddenly slash prices, because when you reduce prices, everyone's happy. If you increase them, no one's happy, and you're going to lose most of your business. So we didn't want to just go slashing, but we also wanted to really understand what is it about pricing and what can we do. And at the time, at the beginning, it was a subscription model where you pay month by month and you get a certain amount of AI video generation credits. We thought from the user research that what users were telling us they wanted was actually just be able to buy credits. So instead of saying, here's a month by month subscription, you can just pay for 10 videos. So we wanted to test this. And the way we tested, we didn't have anywhere near enough volume for A/B tests. What we did was we figured out that we could break our users into different groups and send each of the groups a different offer for pricing. So one of them we sent, hey, look, one-time offer, buy 10 credits for this very competitive price. We also gave some different offers like, hey, here's an offer. If you sign up to a pro plan today and you don't use all your credits in a month, we'll let you carry over your unused credits for 6 months. Mm. Or if you've used all we sent to users who had used all their credits, hey, here's an offer to buy 5 credits more this month. Next month, you get your credits from the subscription. What we actually found was that the offers, which were subscriptions with flexibility, were more popular and had more engagement than the offers which were just, hey, pay us for credits, which was really a surprise. That was different than we had expected from the user research. But from the number of people who were clicking the offer and taking it up, the data was incredibly clear. And we were in the process of doing a complete revamp of the pricing when the company was acquired, and that project never quite saw the end. But it was a case where it was a great example of where we had user research show how users were thinking about this product differently than what we were. Using data then to run some tests, all right, how do we dial in on the solution, and coming up with a solution that was really well supported and something users were telling us they wanted.
I think it's a great story and example for people who are interested in that general, like, how do you bring qual and quant together?
Yes.
And I've always thought, naturally you can use both for lots of different problems, but there is sort of this wonderful happy space where qualitative research helps you build incredibly deep and insightful hypotheses, which then you go into quant to test, because ultimately at the end of the day, it's what people do that matter.
Yes.
So it's a wonderful example. Shame you didn't get to see it the whole way through, but it sounds like the results were very clear cut.
They were incredibly clear, and it was I think all product managers need to be willing to turn on a dime, having strong opinions that are weakly held. I think I went into a meeting on Monday saying, purchasing packs of credit is what our users are telling us. We have to do it. This is what we're going to do. And on the Thursday, they don't want that. They want more flexibility on the subscriptions. The data's telling us that incredibly clearly.
Excellent. And was that, as an isolated example, I mean, did that become a habitual way of working for the team in terms of how they were using data to build hypotheses and run tests, or was that still taking some time?
No, that was becoming it was very lean, very agile. It was going, all right, how do we what's the least amount of effort we can put in to show if this is true or learn how users are going to engage with this? Another example was that a lot of the video styles that were being generated by AI were really dialed into platforms like Instagram, not so much for things like TikTok. Yeah. And we knew that users were telling us they wanted to also be using TikTok. And so we were working on and would launch some different types of AI of videos that could be generated that were more appropriate for TikTok, faster cuts, for instance. And those were positioned in a way that would really show if users wanted, like on the product, that if users wanted it, they were going to click on it very early, possibly a little too early. But from that, we got very clear feedback. Yeah, this is something users want. This is going to bring more users in. This is going to bring more users to Pro. And yeah, that was very much it. Like how to do the fastest, the least amount of work to show that our hypothesis, that were things we believe are true or not.
Sounds like big shift overall for the team from start to finish in this story, and the results speak for themselves.
The amount of work the team was shipping didn't increase, like possibly actually decreased a little bit, but the feedback from the team, like, yeah, we can see now. And there was literally a tree that was available to everyone in the company. Here are the solutions, here's the opportunities, here's the outcomes. And everyone can see, oh, I'm working on that solution and I see how this is adding towards the company goal. And so, yeah, the feedback was very positive from the teams and engineers.
So all in one. I mean, not to understate the work that went into this, but by even slowing the teams down, there was, sounds like, increased motivation from the team, probably just better engagement and retention as a workforce. I would imagine more rapidly addressing customer pains that mattered and in a way that moved outcomes and metrics. And ultimately, if I remember right, you said quadrupled revenue conversion rates.
That's right. So the weekly growth rate of revenue, yeah, quadrupled,
Great. Thank you.
which was just getting the curve up to the point where we could see, all right, let's stretch this out and we could be getting to our goal.
1 million ARR is on that line.
That's it.
Yeah, fantastic. All right. Well, Tim, thank you so much. I mean, this has been fascinating, and I'd like to switch it up a little bit now
Sure.
and get into something that uh, that comes from you. So the question here is there any product growth topics that you're particularly passionate about, and want to have a bit of a chat about and share some learnings or perspectives on?
Sure. So I have been fascinated in philosophy for a long time. And one of the things, there's a big topic in philosophy is how do you know things are true? And I've thought about this a lot in terms of product management. When you're thinking about A/B tests and data and user research, it comes to a lot of, okay, how do you know things are true? And how do you have acceptance within a group that this thing is true and this thing is not true? To take an example, at Booking.com, for instance, Booking.com is famously one of the world's leading A/B testing places. And what is true in Booking.com is an A/B test. If you go around with a positive A/B test, everyone's going to, yeah, that is true. I think I understand this isn't the case anymore, but certainly years ago when I was there were still some people though who didn't necessarily believe user research was true. And I've thought about this, and one thing I've noticed with product managers, one thing that sort of gets them in a bind is product managers have this model of truth which is very close to science. So truth in product management is like how scientists would have proof, which is you need statistical strength, you need observations. And I've actually seen a lot of product managers really get themselves in trouble for that. I'll give you an example. Let's say you're working on an initiative. You've done user research, you've got users telling you, hey, this new feature would be amazing and we'd love it and it'd solve our problems. You can look into data and say, hey, yeah, there's a lot of support that this new feature would be amazing and it'll solve a lot of problems. So you build the feature and you release it as an A/B test, and the A/B test is neutral. Now, if you're taking it from a pure science approach, the hypothesis is not held, the feature should not be released, and you need to walk away and try something else. But I've seen it in practice that happen, and so many really good ideas are prematurely abandoned because of a single A/B test or a single set of A/B tests that couldn't get the evidence. One thing I heard from years and years ago is that there is actually an alternative model to think about evidence and data, and is to think about it like a lawyer. And I've told people this in the past, and they're like, yeah, I don't like lawyers, I'm not going to accept that. But I think it's a bit unfair to lawyers. So if you're in a courtroom, facts matter, and the truth matters, and evidence matters. But you're not arguing to a scientific standard, you're arguing to a group of 12 people in a jury who are reasoning you to show, hey, look, we have facts to back this up. The difference is when a lawyer goes into a courtroom and they've got a case and an argument to make, first of all, they have to have convinced themselves that this is true, certainly more for prosecutors or defendants, but versus defenders. But a prosecutor is not going to prosecute a case that they don't believe is true. So they've got to convince themselves it's true. Then the job they have is to convince other people that this argument is true. And the evidence they use is the evidence that they have. What is the best evidence they've got that this is true? So in a product manager perspective, that best evidence might be user research. It might be an A/B test. It might be data. It might be investigating the trends. It might be dog fooding. It might be looking at what your competitors are doing. And you don't need in product management, you don't need to use a fixed type of proof. You can use whatever proof is relevant at the time and argue it. And the standard is to convince a group of really smart people that the evidence supports that this is a good thing to do. So to go back to the example of the feature, every time I've seen this, the product manager would be better off arguing, hey, this A/B test is neutral, but the data was quite volatile. There are these events in there. We're going to try to use a piece of evidence, or we're going to try to launch this and get user feedback, or we just think it should be left alive for a month and see if it does bend the charts up. In those cases, they would have got better product outcomes and better growth outcomes by letting go of a rigid, fixed scientific standard, which doesn't really work, particularly for rapid growing companies.
This is a very personal topic for me, Tim. Other than having a data background, you may not know this, but I also minored in philosophy back at university. So I have a philosophy and psychology and statistics background, which
Nice.
makes a very dangerous asset when you're in the world of science, and someone who's very self reflective when it comes to what is truth. So you hit me in all the right places. I think I agree with you in many ways, but I also see the flip side of the coin where I've seen people who maybe don't have those um, areas of expertise and training, and they might take what you said as I can find evidence anywhere. I can do whatever I want. And I'm curious how you would maybe protect against those anti patterns or poor behaviors that might come up.
Sure. No, very true. And I remember years ago, I was in a product role. We were partnering with another company, and I was working with a product manager in this other company. And I was talking to them like, oh, how are how are you choosing what to work on? How are you deciding? I guess, oh, a lot of it comes from the CEO, and they decide like, oh, okay, what frameworks? Well, they just tend to decide, look, this is common sense that it's better to do this thing. It's just common sense. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm not sure about that. And this is where that analogy of the jury actually becomes really important, because if it's just one person sitting on their own, well, I think this is obvious, let's do it. Maybe they're Steve Jobs and maybe they're going to get it right enough that you're going to succeed. But there's been lots and lots of cases where it hasn't. But if you're in a strong team environment with lots of people who are empowered to speak up, and this is one of the reasons I love engineers. If they think something's shoddy, they're going to tell you about it. It becomes part of the group. Like, hey, I'm going to argue to you all that I think that this is the evidence to support that this is something that should be done. And if you can get a group of people who are critical and expert, like professionals in tech, to say like, yeah, no, I think that evidence is, it's over the balance of probabilities, it's beyond reasonable doubt. That's usually a pretty good sign. In this case, what the product manager was telling me was that no one in that company actually believed the CEO. They were all very suspicious about it. The CEO hadn't convinced their own team, but the CEO wasn't willing to brook any argument from the team. The CEO was just going to tell them what features to build. And I think that was the mistake in that case. Likewise, though, I do think it's also a mistake for a CEO to say, well, if you don't have a positive A/B test, we're not putting on the feature.
That makes a lot of sense. So, if I sort of interpret what you're saying, it's that you can present evidence that makes sense, but the protection against just pure opinions or doing whatever you want is having a diverse and psychologically safe environment for everyone to evaluate that evidence and align on whether they agree or not, whether your decisions are valuable for the company as a whole. So,
Yeah, and that's right. And it's it's not so much alignment; it's as much inviting people to tell you where you've got it wrong.
yeah,
Like putting your own ideas to the pressure test of other really critical, knowledgeable people, and if it survives that, and and you can have you're using the evidence available to you, it's probably going to be a good idea. And then you ship it and learn lots of new things and pivot on that, and
yeah.
that's the iterative process.
I love it. It makes me think of. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the concept. You probably are of outcome bias.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, this feels like it's always for anyone listening. It's when you judge a decision based on the outcome, not on the information that the person had at the time they made the decision. And one of the hardest things to do is, how do you judge the quality of the decision at the time that the decision was made? And the way you're describing this process is like a wonderful way to do that, because you're saying, well, at the time I made the decision, I had that evidence and I presented it to multiple professionals in our field and our company, and I put them to the test, and ultimately the decision made sense with all that input to go forward. And I think that, sure, it's hard to measure, but it is a great sort of quick test to go, am I making a good call right now,
That's
regardless of
exactly
the
it.
outcome.
Yes.
Yeah, beautiful. All right, we are very close to wrapping up, but I think I'm going to jump into some rapid fire questions
Yep.
just to see what bubbles up, and then we'll wrap it up.
Great.
So I've got three for you today, Tim. First, favorite metric to track.
Daily active users. It's a brutally tough metric to move, but if you do move it, you know you've got something.
Excellent. Uh, do you have a product person crush?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Teresa Torres at the moment. Like I mentioned, we used her framework of opportunity solution trees at 1B Stories, and I think she's doing the most interesting work at the moment in terms of product management processes.
Excellent. All right, that's maybe a new name for some people. They can go and look up Teresa. And last question, most underrated skill in product growth.
Cross-functional marketing skills. I am always shocked when a product manager tells me that SEO is not product management. If you're looking at the dirty little secret of product-led growth, it is as much SEO and content marketing as it is getting users to share and recommend your product. And anyone working in product growth has to at least have a working knowledge of how to leverage SEO and content marketing and influencer marketing and earned media as much as anything else.
Oh, I love it. I remember the first time my product manager, like my manager, not product manager, so my leader, said, like, Simon, you just got to roll up your sleeves and get out there and sell the shit.
That's it.
Yeah, I'm like,
Yeah.
all right, let's do this.
Ah, I was very lucky when I started product management. I was at a startup and we were selling a product to water utilities. Now, organizations like water utilities, they have conferences, and that's how they get to know each other. And we went along to conferences and we had a booth and would meet hundreds of people. And my justification for it was user research, but they were all there to buy things. And so I spent my first few years as a product manager 2 or 3 times a year going to a conference and just selling products to users face to face. And it was easily the best product manager training I think anyone can go through, because when you're actually trying to sell something, what features are important, what are the problems with it, what are the barriers to adopting it, becomes so real.
Yeah.
It was incredible.
Oh, great answer. Well, I think that's definitely a highlight to end on. So, Tim, thank you so much. Really appreciate the time and for sharing your expertise and your story. Thank you.
No problem at all. It's been a pleasure.